Welcome to The Explainer. I am so pumped to have you all here today because we are going to dig into a fascinating mechanical mystery that honestly affects pretty much every single one of us who drives. Now, let me ask you something right out of the gate. When you pull up to the pump and see those skyrocketing gas prices, do you instantly blame the global markets? We all do it, right? We stand there, watch the numbers climb higher and higher, and just sigh at the state of the economy. But what if the economy is only half the story? Let's dive right into this. There's a very real possibility that you are bleeding money right now, and the thief isn't some massive global oil crisis. It's actually sitting quietly right under the hood of your own car. We're going to uncover a hidden, completely preventable mechanical issue that is quietly draining your fuel tank and, unfortunately, your wallet. So, have you ever actually checked the black hole inside your engine? It's kind of a huge contradiction, isn't it? We obsess over fuel efficiency at the gas pump, constantly tracking our miles per gallon, yet the vast majority of drivers totally ignore a hidden issue that's restricting their vehicle's airflow right at this very second. You might be complaining about the cost of living while completely inadvertently letting your engine operate in a state of chronic inefficiency every single time you turn that key. Today, we are going to shine a massive spotlight into that dark space under the hood and show you exactly why your engine gets trapped in this vicious cycle. 50%. Just think about that number for a second. What if I told you that simply wiping away a layer of hidden grime with a cheap, standard rag could literally slash your excessive fuel injection volume by up to 50%? I know, no way, right? It sounds like a fairy tale or maybe just some amateur mechanic's wild intuition. But actually, scratch that. It's not. This is a cold, hard scientific fact. While we're all busy stressing out over global markets and geopolitics, you could be saving a massive amount of fuel just by addressing a basic physical obstruction. It's not about your car just vaguely feeling like it runs better. It's about precise, calculated metrics happening deep inside the computer. So what exactly is causing all this unseen waste? Well, the culprit is absolutely not the economy. It is pitch black carbon sludge. We really need to shift our focus away from external factors we have zero control over, straight to the internal reality of your vehicle. Most drivers completely ignore this buildup. They think, it's just common soot or a little bit of road dirt that naturally comes with driving. That is a grave error. This thick mass of carbon acts as a literal physical barrier. If you ignore this sludge, you're essentially forcing your engine into a permanent state of inefficiency. You are literally just watching your fuel evaporate out the exhaust pipe for absolutely zero mechanical benefit. Okay, so to understand exactly how this steals your fuel, we need to look at the anatomy of the throttle valve. Think of this part as your engine's windpipe. It is the one and only gateway for life-giving air to enter the system. When you press the gas pedal down, a little plate called the butterfly valve opens up to let that air in. But here's the problem. That thick carbon sludge builds up right on the edge of this valve, completely compromising the precision-engineered gap. Now, from a skilled mechanic's perspective looking at scanner data, this isn't just a matter of the part being dirty. It fundamentally alters the air intake volume figures. The vehicle's mass airflow sensor completely misreads the choked airflow, which means your engine's computer is working with totally skewed data right from the jump. Let me break this down with a quick analogy to really drive the gravity of this situation home. Imagine you are out running a marathon. In a clean engine, it's like running and breathing perfectly normally. You're efficient, you've got a great pace. But a carbon-choked engine? That is exactly like trying to run a marathon with your nostrils completely stuffed with cotton. What happens? You suffer severe nasal congestion, right? You are forced to gasp for air through your mouth, your heart rate spikes through the roof, and you waste a massive amount of energy just to stay upright and keep putting one foot in front of the other. Well, your car is doing exactly that right now. Because its intake is clogged with sludge, it is forced to do the mechanical equivalent of mouth breathing. Which leads us to this honestly incredible reality. Your car is essentially gaslighting itself into thinking it needs more fuel just to stay awake. This isn't just about losing a fraction of a second on your 0 to 60 time. This is a full-on systemic panic. Your vehicle's brain doesn't realize the valve is just a bit dirty. It only sees an engine that is struggling to survive. It gets tricked into a state of permanent inefficiency, acting like some thirsty beast lost in the desert, just guzzling fuel out of sheer mechanical panic. It enters this really desperate cycle just to maintain a basic, normal idle. Let's break down exactly how this disaster builds, step by step. First off, the carbon physically narrows the air path. Second, the ECU, that's the engine control unit, detects this severe lack of oxygen and basically hits the panic button. Third, it tries to compensate by forcing that throttle valve to open way wider than its normal resting state. But step 4 is where a mechanic sees the real damage in the fuel adjustment logic. To match that artificial forced opening, the ECU actually increases the injector pulse width, pushing the fuel trim way higher. It commands the injectors to spray a massive, totally unnecessary amount of fuel just to prevent the engine from stalling out entirely. It's literally overfeeding a suffocating engine just to keep it alive while you're sitting at a red light.
And that overfeeding, that is exactly what drains your bank account. You are paying a soot tax every single kilometer you drive. Does it make any sense at all to complain about global oil prices while your engine is actively choking on its own internal buildup? Absolutely not. This sludge acts as a silent thief, tricking the whole system into over-injecting fuel. At this point, you aren't just driving a car to get from point A to point B anymore. You are heavily subsidizing a mechanical obstruction that shouldn't even be there in the first place. You are paying for fuel that never turns into mileage, but simply keeps a choked engine from dying on you.
You know, it's really easy to just assume your fuel economy is dropping simply because your car is getting a bit older, but honestly, that is very often a mechanical failure disguised as old age. You aren't losing fuel just because the car has a lot of miles on the odometer. You are losing it because the engine is completely restricted by its own buildup. Most drivers just sit back and ignore this the whole time until the check engine light finally flashes on the dashboard. But waiting for that light, huge mistake. By the time that light actually comes on, you have already thrown away a small fortune in wasted fuel and seriously compromised performance.
Now, you might be sitting there wondering, is this just some theory or a hunch a mechanic gets? No way. Data does not lie. When a skilled mechanic plugs a diagnostic scanner into your car, they aren't just guessing. They use highly practical inspection tips, checking specific real-time data points like long-term fuel trim and throttle position sensor angles to see the computer actively overcompensating. But proper data analysis definitely requires care. A good mechanic has to be sure to isolate this throttle issue from other interference factors. For example, they'll check to ensure a faulty oxygen sensor or maybe a hidden vacuum leak isn't throwing off the readings and mimicking the exact same symptoms. It's a very calculated, very scientific diagnostic process.
So what does this all mean? How bad is the damage in reality, and how do we actually prove it's been fixed? Well, the ultimate proof is always in the before and after comparison of that scanner data. Once that throttle body is thoroughly cleaned out, a mechanic will pull up those live scanner metrics again, and you can literally watch the elevated fuel trim numbers stabilize and drop right back down to their normal baseline levels. The engine finally stops fighting itself, and that precise, beautiful balance of air and fuel is restored. Understanding this data empowers you to stop the silent fuel thief today. I mean, why keep subsidizing a dirty valve when the fix is so clear, completely measurable, and entirely in your control? Let's fix it, save some money, and get our engines breathing right again.